The word algorithm has become part of our cultural lexicon. But aside from knowing that algorithms help decide which ads we see in our search engines or what type of information gets funneled to our social media feeds, do we really understand the far reaching implications of algorithms, specifically related to anti black racism, social justice, and institutionalized surveillance and policing? In the next few minutes, I'd like to, one, challenge notions that data is objective and that deploying technology like algorithms eliminates human bias. I also want to provide examples of how algorithms, specifically, and technology broadly, perpetuates anti black racism. And finally, I want to highlight some of the innovative research being done to expose the harmful impacts of these technologies and hopefully inspire you to think more critically about the role that algorithms and technology play in fighting for racial justice. We understand algorithms as ubiquitous in the abstract, but let's talk more specifics. Did you know that algorithms are being widely used in healthcare? The US has the highest cost for healthcare in the developed world. We also have some of the worst outcomes disproportionately affecting people of color. With so much data available within healthcare systems, deploying algorithms for more efficient, data-driven decision-making makes sense. What could go wrong? Well, a recent Washington Post article shows a lot. When analyzing the outcome of the use of an algorithm called Optum, they found that it used future healthcare spending as a proxy for future disease. Well, who do you think has more access to healthcare? White people. And since white people spent an average of $1,800 more than black people on healthcare, the algorithm consistently deemed white people to be more ill and therefore recommended more healthcare. In other words, because white people were higher healthcare consumers, the algorithms determined they needed more. Now, there are many things wrong with this logic, but the most troubling is that the algorithm is able to reproduce racially biased outcomes without even using race. Let's take another example. In Chicago, where I'm from, law enforcement use algorithms to try to predict gun violence and also likely perpetrators of this violence. Algorithms have been used to assign risk scores to citizens, overwhelmingly people of color, and have been used for large-scale roundups of people. These predictive policing scores show up on police computer dashboards when you're pulled over. Only you don't know your score, much less how the score was determined, because the algorithm is a proprietary black box. If the idea of a racist minority report deploying algorithms for predictive policing doesn't scare you, consider this. Law enforcement has even partnered with universities to use algorithms to mine social media data in attempts to identify and target citizens. Predictive policing technology has been used for well over a decade. I remember several years back, there was a great deal of controversy over Chicago Police Department's heat list, the first iteration of what would be the strategic subject list. It was an index of initially about 400 Chicago residents, marked as most likely to be involved in violent crime. The police department made visits to these people on this list to let them know that they were being watched. These people had committed no crimes and were not under investigation. Even worse, it was reported that some of the names on the list were children. Oh, by the way, Chicago very discreetly ended their strategic subject list toward the end of 2019. The grant money ran out. But let's talk about surveillance more broadly. In her book, Dark Matters, on the Surveillance of Blackness, sociologist Simone Brown has done amazing research related to racial surveillance and specifically how technologies have objectified and oppressed black people. Joy Lubamwini, founder of the Algorithmic Justice League, has done extensive groundbreaking research on the biases of biometrics such as facial recognition. Research showing gender and skin color bias embedded within these technologies, Specifically, AI producing up to 35% error rates in properly identifying dark skinned women. These facial recognition technologies are even being used in employment decision making, as some employers have begun processing recorded interviews of applicants to determine if they deserve the job. HireVue is an example of one of these AI hiring systems. And the training sets that are used to create many of these technologies are often overwhelmingly white and male. We've even seen online community neighborhood apps such as Nextdoor and Ring devolve into fear-based racial profiling community mobs, posting videos of suspicious people who don't belong in their neighborhoods. But what do we expect? Our claim that these technologies are neutral and that good intentions of safety or fairness should overshadow any harmful implications only serves to cloak the bias, and specifically anti-Black bias, that exists within and across these technologies. If we as a society can't or won't address anti-Blackness, how do we expect to create technology that will fix it? Algorithms are merely an efficient abstraction of our society's values and beliefs. They're cultural products. They're not objective. They're not apolitical. They're not unbiased. And for better or worse, they're not going anywhere. But it's not all bad. We've also seen some impressive usages of technology, specifically social media platforms, to aid in social movement organizing and direct action. As with Black Lives Matter and Tarana Burke's Me Too movement, even the scholars strike, promoting participation in boycotts and boycotts, and campaigns to disrupt technology surveillance, even chatbots that help detect social injustices. Within my own research of the welfare rights movement, I argue that the Black women that led that movement battled technologies of the state while engaging political consumerism and consumer credit as a Black feminist technology. Black women attempted during the welfare rights movement to secure consumer credit, and it shows how these technologies were deployed in service to radical demands around poor people's access to what were in the 1970s considered new consumer credit tools. But the reality is we can't code our way out of anti-Black racism, and we do ourselves a great disservice when we hide behind technology. What we can do is recognize that data is far from objective. Big data doesn't make better data. And before we address anti-Blackness in the digital, we have to, at the very least, acknowledge its existence in the analog.